My partner Ryan just asked me a question. I started answering the question. He goes, Chael, stop. I want to do this on video. I think this is an interesting story. And all he asked me, he said, when was the first time you were over 200 pounds? And I actually knew the answer to that question. I'll tell you why I knew the answer is I had fought in the UFC. My first fight was against Babalu at 205 pounds. And when I got to the scale, the fight was at the Mohegan Sun. And the weigh-ins at that time, 2005, were not a spectacle or a show of any sort like they are now. They're not a TV show. There's not an audience there. It's not, you weigh in because the commission makes you weigh in. So I show up, there's no one there. I mean, there's Babalu and I. The other guys weighing in. Just to set that stage for you. But again, the fight's at 205 pounds. I get on the scale. I have my clothes on. They actually make me take my shoes off, the commission. You must remove your shoes. I took my shoes off. Everything else, I'm dressed. Shirt, pants, belt, socks, underwear. I mean, you get it. 193 pounds. And I remember Dana White looking at the scale, looking at me, looking at the scale, looking at me like back and forth. Like his head, he didn't even say a word. He was just kind of thinking, why did we bring this guy in to fight 205? Now, one thing about that, though, is I had always competed up in weight class after my sophomore year. Through my sophomore year, I remember here, let's back up my own story here, but back up to my freshman year, high school wrestling. I was one of the top guys in the state, if I may shine my own wheels. I was ranked number 3, but I could have won that tournament on any given day. And there wasn't really a scenario where I was going to be less than third. We'd had the whole season. I wrestled everybody. This is my ranking going into state. Only tournament I've ever entered in my life I did not place in. Only tournament. But I remember going into that tournament with one goal, and that was to make weight. Getting down to 115 pounds, particularly at that time in life, you guys remember being 14, being a freshman. Your weight could do anything over a weekend. You could grow an inch. Remember when that would happen? You could be up 8 pounds over the course of a week, having done nothing wrong. So getting down to 115 was just a real challenge for me. And I remember my only goal was to make weight. I come back my sophomore year, not learning any of the lessons that I took away from my freshman year. And I wrestled at 130 pounds. Exact same goal. My goal is to only make weight. I could have won that tournament. It was one of these things. There was no energy, and I just couldn't do it. There was a guy at 136 pounds who I was scared of. I was trying to be away from this guy at 136. So that's why I ended up at 130. At any rate, I learned my lesson after that. I'm never cutting weight again. Not going to happen. And I went on my junior year 157, and I went on my senior year to 185. And there was a weight called 172, and I weighed 173. So it would have been 1 pound. I'm not going to do it. Absolutely not going to cut weight again, wrestle at 185. I bring that to you because when I got into college, I would go with the bigger guys, and they brought me in to be a 177 pounder. And there was another weight class in college called 190. And I had lost my wrestle off. I lost to my teammate Troy Hughes in the wrestle off for 177. So I wasn't even the varsity guy. I wasn't going to get to compete. And I went to the coach. I went to Chuck one day, and I thought this was going to be a whole back and forth. I remember right where it was, one of those moments in life. He was sitting down on the wall, and I said, hey, Chuck, I want to go 190. And that's usually a major conversation. You got scholarship guys that are recruited, coaches that are laying out the map. I wasn't making the team at 177. I wasn't exactly the guy they're going to bend over backwards to help. So I said this to Chuck, see where we could go with this. But I'm going to go 190. And he looks up at me and says, okay. So I got the answer I want. I just turn and hit the locker room. All of a sudden, I'm a 190 pounder. I bring that to you because I didn't make the team. I was backup in my own room at 177. That same year at 190, I was an All-American. So it was one of these things where I just did better with bigger guys. So anyway, when I got into fighting, same thing. I'm going 205. I weigh 193, 191, whatever. I'm going 205. I am never cutting weight again. And I will even tell you from college, the college season is very long. Think of an MMA season. Think of the grind that you go through in MMA. Look, you're going to weigh in 3 times a year. You're going to compete 3 times a year. In college, it's every single week, sometimes twice. 2 weigh-ins, multiple matches if it's a tournament. You could have 6 matches in a week very easily. Duel on Thursday, tournament on Saturday. You could very easily get 6 matches and 2 weigh-ins. I bring that to you because the grind is very real. And amongst my own teammates, the house I lived, I got roommates, but they're on the team. Watching the way they would have to suffer and what they would have to go through. By the end of the season, a lot of guys weren't still around. I bring that to you because when I became an All-American, I think some of that was just the other guys I was competing against were tired. Even though they were bigger, I wasn't doing any of that stuff they were doing. I was doing my workout, going home. I'm on the couch, doing my books, social life, watching TV. They're starving. They're going for runs at 11 p.m., then having to wake up at 6 a.m. and go do another run to get the weight under control. So these were just some of the lessons that I learned and why I wasn't ever going to cut weight again. So after I had my match with Babalu, and the UFC was aware of what I actually weighed, they gave me a contract specifically and exclusively at 185. Ties into my buddy Ryan's question because he said to me, when's the first time you passed 200 pounds? So my whole life, it would have been very handy to weigh 200 pounds. I just didn't. I even had certain times in my life where though I didn't want to cut weight, I also didn't want to be underweight. My senior year in high school, I weighed 173 and the weight was 185. And oh my goodness, it makes me sick, physically sick, just on memory of how I felt back then because I pushed so hard to gain weight. I had 2 wrestling practices a day, but I would lift weights twice a day as well. I would start my day. There was something called Ensure. Ensure's still out there now, but it comes in a little, you pull the cap off and drink it kind of like a V8, but it's kind of a health drink. In terms of it's got X amount of sugars and X amount of proteins. You get about 360 calories in this little thing. There's supposed to be some vitamins and nutrients. I used to drink 6 of those at breakfast. And my mother would make me a chicken fried steak with gravy. I mean, I was doing everything to gain weight. And this was at 6 in the morning. All day, I lived like that as much as I could eat. Now, that might sound kind of cool, particularly to people that know the other end of it, which is cutting weight. As hard as cutting weight is, trying to gain weight and being gorged and stuffed all day, it's equally as uncomfortable, I must tell you. So even though I didn't want to be under, I could never get over 200 pounds. So I weighed 193. The UFC gives me a contract to fight at 185. Within 2 weeks, I weighed 202. It was just one of those things where I didn't want to cut weight. Even 193 down to 185, as easy as that'd probably take me an hour. If I had to go lose 8 pounds right now, how long would it take me? That would take me an hour and 15 at the absolute most. Now all of a sudden I weighed 202 pounds. Never did anything different. Didn't try to bulk up. Didn't try to do anything. Decided mentally I had to go the other way. There was something about mentally knowing I was going the other way made me gain weight. That was the answer to Ryan's question. He thought it was interesting. He thought I should bring it to you guys. Tell me what you think.